The Lead Icon Podcast.
Shape the future. Lead with purpose. Go iconic.
I am Diana Dragomirovic, and welcome to the Lead Icon Podcast, where we have conversations with leaders who choose to take the iconic path. Today, I had the pleasure of interviewing Brian Halse, who is the CEO, co-founder, and executive chair of beHub, a medical software company. The best way to describe what beHub does and the problem they're trying to solve is imagine you are a clinician who works in a hospital. And as a clinician, you interact and engage with many different medical devices. Now, these medical devices are continually upgraded, and that means that their supporting manuals, training manuals, and specifications are also updated. Now, the problem is that you are so busy and under stress because there are so many things that you've got to get through in your day as a clinician that you don't have the time to learn what these new updates are. Well, beHub is attempting to solve that problem, where they, like Spotify, if we use an example, provide like a playlist and give you a playlist, and you choose which medical devices you get to be updated upon. Now, this is very important because when you look at the safety numbers that come out of hospitals, we want to improve them as a society because our loved ones, ourselves, we are impacted by that. Our clinicians also. So what do we do about this? And this is what we explored today with Brian. Brian and I also discussed what are the healthcare predictions that we can anticipate for 2025, and also what AI will be doing in terms of technology, how that will change the landscape of healthcare. What's interesting with Brian is that Brian has an agricultural background. So with that comes a real understanding of what it means to be a responsible citizen. Now, Brian also shared the idea around what it takes to grow a business in our current climate, and we discussed predictions for businesses. So although this interview focuses on predictions for healthcare delivery and patient safety, it also provides excellent guidance for founders and leaders of not just healthcare businesses, but also of other businesses, of what to watch out for next year and how to make better decisions based upon the predictions we discussed. I hope you enjoy this interview, and I look forward to your comments. Brian, welcome today. It's lovely to finally meet with you and discuss not only how you got into the healthcare system, but also beHub. So my first question to you is, tell us about how you got to where you are. What's the journey that got you to open beHub, and how, I guess, what sort of problem are you trying to solve with beHub?
Oh, thank you, and it's lovely to have this chat. I think there's probably a couple of aspects, and I think if you go back a few years, just before COVID, myself and my co-founder, I was working in one organisation running that, and she works in the medical device areas. And all of a sudden, hospitals are under stress. Medical devices were, in short supply, training of people to do how to use ventilators and that. So that was one aspect of it. That there was just this gap where we could see that people weren't actually being able to get trained because the trainers actually couldn't go to the hospitals because they were restricted because of COVID and travel. So that all sort of triggered the idea. And then it sort of just kept on, COVID, as we know, just kept on going and going. And then we realised that, I lived a lot of years back in rural New South Wales, and the trouble of travel and everything else was just completely restricted during COVID. So how do people get education, or clinicians actually get education and training on medical devices? So we did a bit of investigation and found that there's a hole in the marketplace, is that there's great big segments by health departments and everything else that, they procure the product, they know the product, but the training and education sort of slips through the cracks in the business model that they've currently got, because it's all about procurement cost. But clinicians, on the other hand, have become the real strain, and it became more evident after COVID and during COVID that clinicians were, working more part-time, working different shifts. There was the age of clinicians had increased, drastically over the last 20 or 30 years, and that them keeping up their knowledge had just disappeared. And that, if a person works on a night shift how do they know that they're using the products, And products at that time during COVID were getting changed continuously for whatever was available. So there was a lot of replacement products and equipment coming out, and people didn't know how to use it. And that's where the idea sort of sparked from. And we have, my co-founder's got 30 years knowledge of nursing and medical devices, and it was pretty clear there was a big hole in the marketplace to actually attack that with our sort of platform. So, yeah, that's how we got to the idea. And after that, it's been a journey that is never ending.
It's an excellent idea, Brian, because most of us have had, I guess, experiences in hospitals and with doctors where, that you can see that they're not supported. And because the system is quite, how can I say, stressed, for various reasons, I feel that the support that, I guess, beHub will offer can give clinicians an immediate reference of how to. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think the best way that someone has described beHub is if you think about Spotify and what Spotify did for music. It created, it accumulated all that information, all those music catalogue in one location, and we make playlists for ourselves. That's exactly what beHub does. It accumulates all that information in one spot, and a hospital makes a playlist for all its clinicians and its departments and its aged care and everything else. And it becomes very simple. And there's two levels of education in that sort of medical sphere. There's the one that gets the actual product with the person who's actually using it on the floor, the clinician. And then there's the higher level that is, for the doctors and the, technicians that are doing the higher level work there. And that's not what we're after. That is not our market for what we do at beHub. Our market is to support the 500,000 clinicians that work at the coalface of delivering care to patients, because that's where the greatest stress is.
Yeah, and that's evident when you walk into a hospital or even a busy medical centre or imaging centre. I wear a couple of hats, Brian. I lead the Lead Icon, which is, what we're basically, on this platform today. I also am a CEO of a medical network, and from a survey that we conducted last year, all the clinicians basically said that they wish they had more education and training and more mentoring. So you do fill a gap, I feel, and I'm wondering how well is the administrative level, taking on this type of technology?
That's an interesting question, and it varies from state to state. So for the people listening, there's two aspects of the Australian medical sort of health system that I see. One sort of, there is no federated, it's all run by the states. So what beHub does is that we effectively have one platform that will go across the states. So we're rolled out in Alice Springs, we're in the Murrumbidgee Local Health District at the moment, rolling out. And that's okay, but no one's actually taking control of the medical devices and the products that are coming on board all the time. Mm-hmm. So there's a procurement, because cost in healthcare is so enormous. A lot of the focus has gone on that, reducing the costs of the equipment that they're they're giving out to the hospitals. And I completely understand that. And that's where it stops. Because there's not enough, educators on the ground in any hospital. And there's so many products. There's a 1.5 million products that are purchased, different products that are purchased in Australia annually. That's a lot of training, a lot of equipment that people have got to know something about. And not only are the clinicians getting more mobile from working from, different hospitals or different departments, patients are getting transferred greater distances because we're centralised, particularly in rural and regional areas, because we've centralised our hospitals. As in, Wagga's a large hospital, Griffith's a large hospital. 20, 30 years ago, you had, outlying hospitals, that could actually deal with a patient. That doesn't happen anymore. Mm-hmm. So there's those issues that continue. But we've got a decreasing number of clinicians, and that's the biggest issue.
That's a great point you raise, and it segues really well into the next, I think, topic we need to cover, and that's these challenges that we're talking about that exist in the current healthcare system. What do you think is the cost to government, the taxpayer, and also to lives for this stress?
I don't think there's any. I mean, I don't know how much I know that New South Wales Health is the largest employer in the state. And I think that they do an incredible job for what is in front of them. And I think all the health departments do an incredible job along those lines. I think what my view of it is that we spend an enormous amount of money trying to do research to cure, diseases and everything else. But quite often when you're in business and you take a pragmatic view of business, the first thing you do to improve the system is look at the low-hanging fruit, for one analogy, and say, well, how can we improve that to make it easier? And I think that's where beHub fits in the scenario, because it makes it easier. But the cost of actually lives and the risk, there is a risk to it. And, it's not widely documented because no one wants, but there's a lot of near misses in hospitals. It's a well-known fact. There's near misses about how things are done or, late at night, whatever. But there is a lot of near misses. And I think there's a cost to that. But what that cost is, I don't think it's pretty hard to document from any level, I think.
There was research conducted by the state government back in the 1980s regarding I think the title was misdiagnosis in healthcare. And the figure that came up was somewhere around the line of every year in the vicinity about 110 to 150,000 people are harmed due to misdiagnosis. And the deaths are, in the few thousands. Now, something like beHub, and this is a thing that the government, I think, really wants to solve, because it is a problem for clinicians. And it sounds like the type of software that you've created will help do that. Now, in terms of we look to 2025. Now, we talked about, the challenges, which, everybody agrees on. Now, what do you think in terms of technology? Where do you think technology's role will play with health delivery, moving forward?
So I think there's two aspects to that question. One is that you have to realise that hospitals and health departments have legacy units and computer systems that have been built up since day dot of computers. And the enormous cost of that, of changing to try and get them all interoperable, is enormous. So there's that one there. The second one is where the new technology of AI and that sort of diagnostic field is going to go to. I think it's still unproven, and it will be, I think, for a number of years, because machine learning is only as good as, it's the old data in, data out scenario, good data in, good data out, bad data in, bad data out. And I think that needs to be still worked on. And this is where even our platform, if we're getting the information directly from medical device manufacturers, we've got a centre of truth about that information. It's not on YouTube, it's not on TikTok, it's not on Instagram. It's come direct from the people who actually supply that product or manufacture that product. And I think that's, in one essence, is where AI will be beneficial, when there's someone can actually understand the centre of truth, and that is actually where that information is. But I think in 10 years, 15 years, I think you might see, astronomical changes about how we use AI as it evolves and develops. But, healthcare industry is notoriously thinks they're innovative, but they're also very protective because they don't want any risk, understandably, because there's patient care involved. So I think it'll take a long time to translate into something that people can see on the floor at a hospital, AI and that sort of machine learning. But it's, the cost of humans on the ward and everything else that happens in health, it'll get there. Someone will make that giant leap across that line, and AI and that machine learning, whether it's doing manual tasks in the hospital or something, it'll come around very quickly.
It's interesting. I interviewed a couple of years ago she's an expert in AI delivery in the hospital system, and she was based in the US, and now she's in South Australia at one of the universities. And at the moment, AI is very good at predictable problems like strokes. However, when there's a complicated issue where you can't actually find the source of the problem, AI doesn't have that capability just yet, and many believe that may never happen, because as humans we have that creative ability, number one. And then number two, what do you think about the idea, that humans still need to be the ones that AI can give you the start of where to look, but then you still need to have your, the critical thinking in place. How do you think that will affect, clinicians moving forward? Will it make them more lazy in terms of how because, the stress to get to an outcome? What do you think?
I think AI will come to some form of plateau in that health system until someone solves the critical thinking side of things. And, let's say, there will be some acceptance of AI at some level, whatever everyone feels comfortable with, where that risk is. But there's got to be someone to deliver that, to actually second check.
Yeah.
And I think that's the issue. And that's the issue that, that we understand it. And what we're trying to solve with beHub is that there always needs to be that second check. Now, whether it's the training that you did 3 months ago, or whether it's, hang on, I'm not sure that I put that needle in that way, or I do that. There's got to be some second check. And I think that's always the issue. Mm-hmm. I think that's where AI will get to some level. It might make it more palatable to people who want to become clinicians and registered nurses. But I think there'll have to be some second check along the lines about how things are done.
The other aspect of technology, I believe, and this is from, again, that survey that I mentioned to you, and then from just speaking to people in, our peers and in the networks that we, roam in, privacy and data. What are you doing to ensure that, for example, privacy, security, while providing seamless access, is available to your clients?
So the beHub platform and our developer, who's a partner in the businesses, is well and truly adverse across all these lines. And we have we do the standardisation with ISO 2700, things like that, to make all our management processes okay. We're investigating the blockchain and where that's going to fit into that, identity of clinicians and their learnings, because I think this is where technology is going to be really great is if people or a clinician will have micro learnings. So a knee replacement might be different on the left knee to the right knee. That clinician's had training on the left knee. It's verifiable. She owns that data. They have their own identity about that data. That data can be transferred for the hospital for compliance and risk management and governance issues. But that clinician eventually has to hold their own data and have their own unique identity about who they are and what they've learned. And that's where we're investigating that side of things. But the beHub portal, the way it's structured, doesn't actually hold any financial data from clinicians or anything like that. And that's what we've tried to stick right away from, because that's, it doesn't hold patient data. It doesn't hold anything like that. And that's where we've tried to focus, is to keep that identity of a clinician being able to hold their own data, because they move from one institution to another facility. They have, don't work for 5 years, families, all that sort of stuff. But quite often when you go across local health districts, you have to go back and relearn all the documents that you've already learned at one organisation. So it's just that sort of, we're trying to make it simple from that point of view. But cybersecurity is going to be an issue, it always will be. But we believe that we've actually taken the attitude that because we don't hold any financial data or any identifiable data from clinicians, that we're pretty safe from that point of view.
Separate to beHub, that's fascinating, and it's good to know that organisations like beHub are actually thinking along those lines, because I think that many people are worried about data, because data is now, touted as the new gold. And so what do you think from a leadership perspective would be, I think, a good idea for companies to be exploring in terms of data protection? We hear about decentralised systems. We hear about, people are worried about what platforms, are basically managing their data. What do you think about that area? What can we do as not only as consumers, but also as leaders?
Well, I think there's probably two aspects. I think if you go back years ago, a Prime Minister once touted the Australian card and everyone jumped up and down. I think these days, the generation below us are quite happy to shed their profiles across social media channels and everything else. And I think that's one aspect. But I think companies need to take a very hard look about how they manage their data, and the storage of that data, and obviously how they destroy that data, over periods of time. And I think that's more or less how we've got to do it. But I think also we need to, the industry along many lines needs to come up with some standard protocols about how we do things and how we should. You can hire a consultant, but they'll tell you one, and another consultant will tell you another. I'm interested in how technology, and particularly the blockchain, is going to change that going forward. I think it's a very interesting way of holding data. I think it's intriguing because a person holds the data rather than the company or the organisation. And I think it's a turn on the head scenario. Everyone says, well, it's my data. Well, it is your data, so maybe you should. It's a bit like your bank account number. Maybe you should be the one responsible for it, not the organisation. It's an interesting way of looking at it, but I think it'll take a few years to come around.
Because when you look at the breaches in security that occur, I've often heard that any system is hackable. And so we need to have, I think, these types of conversations, because it's only getting worse. Like I get, I had a data breach not long ago that really, upset things in my life. And then it's made me now realise, hold on a second, how am I actually sharing my data? So I think that's an important thing, and thank you for raising that. Now, as a founder as a leader of a business? You know what it's like in Australia in terms to grow a business. It's like I say, we obviously love pain. Looking forward now to 2025 and beyond, what predictions do you have for businesses? Especially, it doesn't have to necessarily just be in I guess, in the health system. It can be any type of business. What sort of predictions do you want to share that you see as on the horizon we need to be aware of that can help us with better decisions?
I think we have to embrace where AI is going to take us. Mm-hmm. It might take us a while to get there, but there'll be many jobs or industries that are decreased, for whatever reason that AI will take over. I'm old enough to remember the days when the Commodore 64 computer came out and people said, oh, well, we'll only be working 4 days a week. Well, now we work around with smart computers in our hands called phones. So, it hasn't reduced, hasn't given us the lifestyle that we all predicted we would have. And I think that's what's going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years. I think there'll be a bit of a revolution about what jobs are actually, we can basically palm off to AI and the components of that to take away those menial tasks. That will get rid of a lot of lower paying jobs, I'm assuming, but there's still a need for a physical component in the workforce, and that will never change. So I think that's where I can see AI is going to take us. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens for companies with interest rates going forward. But that's a financial constraint for a lot of people. And I think if the world continues the way it's going, interest rates might stay where they are in Australia. There's probably likelihood they could decrease, but there's just as much likelihood they could increase if, the world doesn't, get its stuff together in the next 6 to 12 months. And that will cause, a lot of grief in Australia. But I think in all terms, business in Australia, for the majority of businesses, probably as much as is just going along quite nicely without too much interference from outside factors.
Mm-hmm. The AI that you mentioned is important, and also, I guess, the economic indicators. What else is on your mind in terms of, for business? What do we as leaders, founders need to take into account so that we can build stronger companies?
I think we've got to take an appreciation of what the younger generations are doing. I've got adult kids and how they work in the business, in their workforce at the moment is different to how I did it. And I think there's that great generational change about, do they want to come to the office? What do they want? How do they want to work, and where they're going to work in that sort of technology field, particularly? I think it's going to see a lot of change in the next 10 years, as technology has given us for the last 30 or 40 years. It stays stable for a number of years, and all of a sudden, AI or some computing power makes a giant leap. And I think that's what's going to happen. I think it's going to round. Business is going to have to grasp technology because, there's a lot of interoperability between how you run your business these days. You can do all your payroll almost like at a touch of a button these days, and a lot of those processes are going to get better over time. But I think as the ecosystem of the Australian economy at the present moment, I think we're going okay. And I think most people going into 2025 would like to see, the economy pick up a little bit and move forward. But I think that all depends on, the next probably 6 months to see what the financial side of things work around the world. And I think that'll be what that drives us into 2025, how people perceive that, the future in, what happens outside Australia.
What change would you like to see with respects to greater assistance with, I guess, small to medium-sized businesses, fast-growing businesses? What changes would you like to see from the government sector, even private sector, to help boost, boost growth? We spoke about this before, where you look at countries like the US, Singapore, Estonia, Israel. They have quite comprehensive founder programs. What would you like to see change in Australia?
Well, I think there's, I have seen over the last 3 odd years the amount of money in the startup world just shrink from a government point of view. It's gone from when it was freely available, not freely available, you had to do due process and everything, but it was much more acceptable. Now it's become a long-winded process where, there's full-blooded, applications that have to put in for, very little amount of money. I think the government's almost dried that up totally on any level. I just don't think it's, to some degree, it's hardly worth it by the time you start the application to the 5 or 6 months down the track when you get a response. That's not how the startup world starts, because 5 or 6 months down the track, you don't probably have a business if you're waiting on the government funding to come through. And I'm probably pretty pragmatic about the startup world. I think they do some really good stuff, but I think most of us are trying to build businesses and, long-term businesses that actually, don't work on their, quite often the startup world's metrics of, I want 10x of this and that. Some of us are just trying to build really sustainable businesses that actually do good for just not myself, but for the rest of the community. And I think that's where you don't quite fit into the startup world. You're not going to be a Canva or, all those type of businesses that everyone's going to earn squillions out of. I think there's just that 2-level scenario. There's a lot of businesses that have startup businesses that have tried to make money, got a lot of funding, and then failed very quickly. We've been going for a number of years, and we've hit a lot of roadblocks for what we do, and it's not an easy path by any means. And I think there needs to be more support, but it needs to, on the flip side, governments need to be a little bit more. We're not public service. We're a little bit more entrepreneurial than that. We can't fill out, hundreds of pages of application forms to actually do something that's relatively simple.
Yeah, the red tape is a real problem, Brian. And the interesting thing that you raised about, businesses attracting funding, and we're talking lots of coin. And have you ever seen the CB Insights reports on ventures that have failed? Yes. And we're talking 300 million, 500 million, 1 billion, and they fail. And that makes my hair stand on end, because like you said, if you're trying to build a business the old-fashioned way, where you're out there, in the arena, slogging, getting clients, and then you see that failure, it is quite upsetting, because that's money that's gone down the drain, for a whole ecosystem. So what advice can you give to other sort of people who are either growing their businesses? I mean people who are growing their businesses. What should they be focusing on if they're hoping for venture funding or government funding? What are the sort of key, 3 points that you could say to them, what they can focus on to help them grow their business? Based on your experience.
That's not a fair question, may I say. I personally have a real have a bit of a thing about the pitch decks. I understand that we all need to do it, but it's pretty hard to verbalise what a pitch deck or a few words in a pitch deck does. And if you're a really good presenter, and I've seen many of over the years of great presenters, but there's not a lot of substance underneath what they do. And I think that, I've had people who said, we'll get back to you in 6 weeks for this, and, send us a 10-slide pitch deck and can't go more than 1 minute and bang. And you sometimes wonder why that sort of scenario becomes part of the sort of the voice of that startup venture capital world, because there's a little bit more to a pitch or a business than 10 slides. And I don't think people appreciate that at all levels. Towards governments are always hard. Governments are stressed because of money issues, stressed because of they have due processes of how they do things. But I do think that particularly in that lower end of what they're doing, I think they could be far more entrepreneurial than what they presently are. They could actually almost set up a pseudo, venture capital business like the ones in Sydney, Blackbirds and all the other ones, that sit there and basically entrepreneurs could pitch to them. And if they thought that pitch was good enough, they could say, let's go and you do some bit more paperwork and, fill out our boxes and our criteria. And then we'll have a look at giving you some funding for whatever that grant funding might be. But I think they could actually, cut out a lot of the due process and act much more entrepreneurial or small business-like than what they currently do, where they insist on the paperwork first, and then we'll think about it on a desktop where they actually don't see anything behind the business. So I just think they should turn that on their head when it comes to grant funding to some degree.
And what about for the founders and business owners, looking to grow their business? What do you think they need to focus on?
Probably a good wine cellar. I think, look, we're always we're focused on our costs and delivery and our customer experience, and I think that's what most founders do. We have some mutual friends who've got businesses together, and I've learned a lot from there who've basically rewritten their whole platforms to move with the times in their industry. And most founders are very agile doing that. And you can't be too fixed on your initial idea. And our initial idea was completely different to what we've actually got now. And that's taken a few years to evolve. Even the story we tell today is different to what we told 2 years ago.
Do you mind sharing what your original idea was? Because I think that evolution in a brand and in a business is fascinating.
So my background, I spent a number of years in agriculture, and you can scan a back of a drum or a bag or go to your grocery store and you can get exactly what it is in your code, your barcode at the back, your GS1 code. And my idea originally was, why can't we do that in health? Just have a GS1 code at the back and scan it all, and it populates all the information. Well, it doesn't quite work like that. So that was I spent 3 or 4 months investigating where that would lead us, what that would do, and it's a great idea. It works really well, in that sort of supply chain management side of things. It falls over when you've got a user or a customer at the end who's a clinician, and not everything has a barcode, and it just didn't quite work out. But we spent a fair bit of time looking at that. And, we've come up with sort of a compromise that works a little bit along those, but, we're a long way from what my original thought was. This will be really easy, and this will be, this will happen, bang, 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 and everyone will be grateful for what beHub has done for them. And now we've got a much more succinct platform that more aligns to what clinicians actually need. And we took the viewpoint after several long months trying to work out what our business was actually going to do, where we turned around and worked out what's a clinician want to do on the first day of walking out of graduating or on the first day of walking into a hospital. And we effectively put ourselves in their shoes and said, well, the first day you walk into any job is terrifying, any new job. What do they actually need? Well, they need to know the top 10 products that are going to be used in that department. They're going to have the confidence that when they're sitting on the train going to work, they can look at those products and say, oh, I've got a fair understanding of, how that works, blah, blah, blah. So that's where we started off. And then we had to work out not every clinician in Australia is going to be tech savvy. So it has to be really, really simple and easy to use. And then you had to work out all the other aspects. But that, so we went sort of almost from that supply chain, buying the product and a code all the way through to working out, no, a clinician actually needs this, doesn't matter where they are and what they want to do. So it sort of turned our business from one end of model, starting over on the left, to starting over on the right to the end user and working our way back. So, yeah.
Yeah, that user experience with technology is crucial and not done very well, I think, from a customer service point of view. With respects to and it's good to see that you're focusing on that, especially with your customers. If I can just ask you, when it comes to businesses like you and I, why do you think it is so hard for many businesses to adopt technology, knowing that, it is going to be an important, I guess, capability moving forward? What is it, and what can we do to alleviate people's fears?
Yeah, I think I think the answer is probably in several parts here. One is sometimes organisations, and I've run several, is that you've already made plans when a new proposition comes to you. You've made plans about how much time, how much human resource you can put in, and that's an issue. A small business wants to implement a new software platform. There's a time and effort to get that software platform in, and that's a cost to the business for the benefits. So there is that. I think also that people quite often perceive exactly how much work needs to be done, and I think that's where we've focused. What beHub does is that we can actually say, well, to a medical device manufacturer, you put this product on our platform and everyone who's signed up will have access to that product. They'll be able to view the information about that product. So they do it once. Quite often, organisations have to do it repetitively to load up information so it goes over and over and over again. And I think that's a cost to a business. So there's lots of things about what people perceive as a cost to their business is the resources you need to put in. But I think the easiest answer that anyone gives first up, and normally they give it 5 or 6 times, is no. Because, it's not under my remit. My business is running fine. If I do this is going to take time, effort and money, initially. So unless it's a great change, most people would say it's not in my remit and I don't need to be part of it. How we get over that, that's human nature, and that's the difficult part about, seeing what you can achieve out in the marketplace.
And like you said, people will be forced to adapt eventually, and if you're you care and you want to realise your vision, you'll be more, you'll be agile. Now, in terms of, blended on this note, Brian, in terms of healthcare, how do we better support our clinicians and our doctors and our hospital systems, not only just as consumers, but how can we do a better job there?
It's nothing like the easy question at the end, is there really? Look, we've got to make things simpler for them. The healthcare industry isn't based in Sydney or Brisbane, capital cities. It's right across Australia. There's almost 1,600 facilities across Australia of varying sizes. There's 5,000 aged care units. We've got to make things really simple and easy for them, because the biggest strain and the biggest cost is when those services has to move, or you have to move a patient to some other place, and you're straining staff. That is the biggest cost. They can talk about the price of needles or $1 million machines, but it's that human cost that really is going to drive, change, because every clinician that leaves the business leaves a hole. And I don't think there's a facility in any state here that's not looking for, numerous clinicians on any level. So there's a hole there. So we've got to make it really easy for clinicians to do their job, because they are the people who are the caregivers, not the bureaucrats, but that is what they need to do. They need to make it as easy for those people to turn up in the morning, do their shift, be part of the team, do the job right, do all the compliance, have no worries, and walk out at the end of the day going, geez, I did a good job today. And that's the biggest issue. So you need to make everything that they do simple, succinct, reportable, supportive on lots of levels, so that they can do their job, because you're not going to get those people out in the regional rural areas unless that's exactly what you do for them. And that's where the biggest holes are.
We won't get the health outcomes we desire if we don't approach it the way that you've said. Like, I was looking at a stat. The health services industry is expected to grow from 6.3 trillion from last year to 12.5 trillion 2028. So that's a lot of disease that we're going to be treating, and yet we're talking about cures. So there's something not right here, because like what you said, we need to focus on the younger generation and help them make good decisions and help with prevention around them. So I think platforms like beHub will be very helpful, as diagnostics, that area increases in importance. Now, Brian, where can people reach you? So if any clinician or hospital administrator or medical centres watching, where can they actually reach you and find out more about your product and get a demo, basically?
Well, I think the easiest way is just go straight to our website at beHub, which is behub.com.au. That's the easiest way to get a quick overview of what we do. And it's very easy to have a very view of our platform of various levels, whether you're a manufacturer, a hospital, or a clinician. And the platform is built basically from that look of a clinician, making it as simple, as easy for them as possible. So that's what we've aimed to do. So yeah.
One last question, and I always ask founders, ambitious founders, what's your exit? What's your desired exit?
I'm probably not your original founder, as in, I should have been doing this when I was 30, not at my age now. Look, we're building beHub because we think it makes a difference. We think it could make a significant difference and make life easier for lots of people. What's my exit? I'd like one of the I'd like one of the state health units to come and be a co-developer with us, and leave it to someone else to decide that. Money's not driven me. I think this is actually, it won't work. This platform just doesn't work in Australia, but it will work in, the South Pacific Islands. It will work anywhere there's a health issue. And I think that's where it's got that community and that basis of where it can make a significant difference, not just in Australia, but across the world in what we're trying to do. So that's my exit, when someone decides that they're going to come and join me on the journey. But it's not rocket science what we do. It's just a unique way of looking at a very long problem that's been going on since Florence Nightingale was a nurse. And that's getting information to the people who actually use the products.
Yeah, and thank you for putting thoughtful and hard work into trying to solve this problem, because it affects all of us, every single one of us, whether directly or indirectly. Brian, thank you. It was a pleasure to hear your story, and thank you for sharing your predictions. I think a lot of not only clinicians but also other businesses, business leaders can learn a lot from it. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you very much for your time, Diana. Bye.
Enjoyed the interview with Brian from beHub. Now, if you'd like to get in touch with Brian, please reach out to him through their website, www.behub.com. And if you'd like to find out more about the lead icon or become a future guest yourself, if you've got something important that you'd like to share with the world, then contact me at www.theleadicon.com. Thank you so much for spending time with us today.